So the thing with the Smiths is they're a band known for creating a home for the rejects and the lonely. So how did they end up being played at Donald Trump's rallies? Today on the podcast, what happens when a band's music gets adopted by Trump and the MAGA movement? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. All right, you have heard the story before. Politicians hold a rally and then they play a song. Then the band and the fans are completely outraged. It seems like there's one of these stories every single election cycle, but this time it feels different. Take a listen.
So, for once in my life, let me get what I want. Lord knows it will be the first time.
That is Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want by the Smiths. That song is from 1984. But what you just heard is that song being played at a rally for Donald Trump. And you heard some fans singing in the background. There's some people singing in the background. But also, a lot of fans of the Smiths are really fired up. Mostly because of what the Smiths' music meant to fans in the 80s and what these songs said about their identity. And how strange it is to hear these songs played at a Trump rally. But is it that surprising? The band's lead singer, Morrissey, has been pretty outspoken after the band broke up, and he's taken some, let's say, controversial views on things. Here to explain how we got here is journalist and author, and I assume long-suffering Smiths fan, Luke O'Neill. Luke, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, man. Thanks for joining us. Listen, before we get into what happened at this whole Trump rally thing, maybe let's just talk about what the Smiths' music represented to fans like you. Like, if you met another person who also listens to the Smiths, you go like, oh, we have something in common. What does that mean?
Well, sure. I mean, they were one of the most influential and beloved bands of their time, and they continue to be. So it's not like they're, this super niche thing. But the stereotype of the Smiths fan was always a sort of melancholy loner or sad,
Yes.
artsy type, always pining for unrequited love. Something that was captured very well in the lyrics. And,
Right.
And, it's not like it's some sort of secret club. Again, they're a very famous band, but it is a nice base for friendship if you met someone with a similar affinity for the band.
The saddest lyrics you ever heard and people connecting over those lyrics. Listen, you go, that's a beautiful basis for connection. What do you make of the fact that the Smiths are now this central part of the soundtrack at Trump rallies?
Well, it's funny. You said up top, is it really this strange? And that that happens to be the name of a Smith song. Is it really so strange? But this is a bit more complicated than some of the similar stories that you hear like this every election cycle. Whether it's Rage Against the Machine or Bruce Springsteen or someone like that, whose politics clearly differ from whatever the Republican might be.
Yeah.
In this case, Morrissey, and this surprises me that he's not a fan of Trump. He said some...
Morrissey, the lead singer of the Smiths, but yeah.
Yeah, the singer, has said some things, anti-Trump things over the years.
Yeah.
But, like you alluded to, he's also spent the last, 10, 20 years sharing xenophobic, anti-immigrant, and sometimes downright racist comments. And, that sort of align with a lot of the type of things that Trump and his fans believe in.
Yeah. I got to tell you. Go ahead.
I was going to say he's also Morrissey, the singer, is a blowhard who loves the sound of his own voice and will do anything to get attention. And does that sound like someone else we know?
I have to say, like, every time that Morrissey, just the name, is trending on Twitter, you see that fans of the Smiths just like in complete despair. Like, oh no, it's happening again. The person who gave voice to so much of our loneliness and our heartbreak. He's once again said a thing that is going to frustrate me and frustrate everyone I know. Like, it seems to be like almost a recurring part of the news cycle every year. Like, you get into summer and you go, what's Morrissey going to say this summer that's going to make everybody really upset,
Exactly. And I mean, it's a lot of it, he's a very big on self-pity and victim complex, and I think that, again, that it's why it sort of aligns with Trump. But
Yeah.
being frustrated with Morrissey has been part of the experience, all along. And some would say, some of this stuff has been in the music all along. He's got songs like National Front Disco and Bengalian Platforms that were kind of controversial, but there was always this level of irony in the lyrics, and his entire persona is sort of this facade. So it sort of gave us a plausible deniability, It's like he's playing a character of a National Front, skinhead or something like that. But then over the past few years, it's been like, oh, maybe that wasn't irony all along.
I mean, that's the thing I got to ask you is that I think like the Smiths sort of engender a fandom that is really loyal and really beautiful in many ways, because Morrissey for years was sort of seen as like rock's preeminent outsider poet, right? He's the guy who captures all the sad feelings that are in your soul, but he's changed a lot. He's disappointed fans. You've mentioned some of the xenophobic posts that he's sort of put out, or statements that he's put out over the years. How do you go about trying to reconcile, being a fan of his music with the person that he appears to have become?
Well, we've all been having this conversation about how to separate the art from the artist, or whether or not one has to, for years now, particularly, in the past, 5, 8 years, whatever it's been.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any hard and fast rule. If you talk to 10 people, they're all going to be fans of someone who's somewhat problematic, or maybe, downright bad.
Yeah.
And we all have our own line that we draw, whether it's, Michael Jackson or, whoever.
Or Kanye West,
Yes.
Yes.
Or Kanye, yeah.
Yeah.
I personally listen to the Smiths and Morrissey solo music a lot less than I used to.
Yeah.
And I don't go to his shows anymore. I guess that's one way people kind of justify things like that. Like, well, I'm not giving them any money. But I guess the real thing that I do when I listen is I tell myself I'm listening to the lyrics of a younger man who hadn't said a lot of this stuff at the time. The very beautiful music was written.
I love that. I love that as a way of working your way through it. I think you kind of have to say that to yourself because, listen, pal, you got a bunch of Smiths tattoos. Like, there's no way, there's no way through this except for to figure out some kind of way to reconcile it. But and I think that's important work. I think actually we don't do enough of that reconciliation work. We got to say, you mentioned that both Morrissey and his writing partner in the Smiths, Johnny Marr, have made anti-Trump comments in the past. Marr was quick to condemn that Trump used his music for the rallies, but Morrissey hasn't said anything. You've interviewed both of these guys. Does that surprise you at all?
It doesn't surprise me at all that Johnny came out right away and said something. He's, by all accounts, is a beautiful and lovely man who everyone loves.
Yeah.
I am surprised, in fact, that Morrissey hasn't said anything yet. He loves to issue these little edicts through his website or his fan website from time to time.
Yeah. He says warily. Yes, continue.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say about the tattoo, I do have a big picture of his face on my shoulder, but conveniently, people always ask me if it's Elvis, so I'll just let them go with that. Although, not that Elvis doesn't come with his own package too, so we can't really win here.
Slightly longer baggage, it's
Right.
age in a different way. Maybe
Right.
that's the out that you can use. I read an article in The Guardian where the writer joked if ChatGPT were to summarize every Smith song, it would narrow it down to the sentence, "Nobody's being treated as badly as me." That does sound like something that Donald Trump would say. Is it a surprise to you that the MAGA people, the MAGA faithful, are connecting with the Smiths music and putting it in their rotation?
No, I guess not. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of that self-pity in the feeling that you're the singular, unique, put upon main character of the universe. That seems to line up pretty well with both Trump and MAGA type people. But then again, there's also this thing like people. Like maybe there are some actual Morrissey and fans of like post-punk type music. Like punks get old. I can tell you that for firsthand. And a lot of people tend to get their politics, not always, but oftentimes they get a little more conservative when they get old.
Yeah.
So maybe people are just aging into a different political demographic here.
I have to say that the reason it wasn't a big surprise to me when I first heard the Smiths at a Trump rally is that I think like a large part of the Trump appeal has been making the argument anyway, that people who attend these rallies have been alienated from mainstream politics. And so to play music that fits in line in general with alienation, that doesn't seem like a surprise to me. Is that part of the overlap here, do you think? Is that how they're thinking about it? Yeah.
I think it could be that, but I mean, I don't know if this is really going to be. I don't know if we're going to see, a huge uptick in sales of "The Queen is Dead" over this. It's probably just like a little curiosity here, and I mean, that'd be interesting to see. The change in demographics at his concerts if he really does blow up amongst these people. It's going to be a lot fewer aging goths and
I also have a hard time imagining that whoever's making this playlist is trying to specifically curate for like an emotional landscape. You know what I mean? I think they just like the Smiths. I think that's probably what this has come down to. Luke O'Neill, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to talking to you the next time Morrissey says anything. Thank you.
So you'll have me back on tomorrow.
I sure will. Luke O'Neill is a veteran music and political journalist. He was in Boston. You can read his writing by subscribing to his newsletter called Welcome to Hell World. His most recent book is called A Creature Wanting Form. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is Commotion. Listen, Pablo Escobar once said that Griselda Blanco was the only person who ever scared him. And if you've seen any of the new Netflix series Griselda, you would understand why.
You look like
a housewife covered in blood. I moved cocaine for 10 years, Medellin to New York. And you have no idea what I have gone through since. I'm gonna be here every night until you tell me yes.
Man, just absolute shudders. That is Griselda. Griselda tells the truish story of the only woman to run a Colombian drug cartel and how she conquered a brand new market for cocaine while also trying to raise her 3 boys. This series stars Sofia Vergara, who will be forever remembered, I think, as Gloria on Modern Family. Vergara also executive produced the series. Manuel Betancourt has been a fan of hers since he was a kid growing up in Colombia. He's a culture writer who now lives in L.A. Manuel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm happy that you're here. As I mentioned, this show opens with this quote from Pablo Escobar. The only man I was ever afraid of was a woman named Griselda Blanco. Coming from one of the most notorious narcos, that is quite the statement. Who was Griselda and what made her so remarkable?
Yeah, well, her nickname was Cocaine Godmother. And the other one was Black Widow. And they go hand in hand because she was this sort of revered but equally as feared drug trafficker that really opened the drug trade from Medellin and into Miami, into New York, later into California. So she was really moving a lot of drug in the 1970s to the 80s. But she was ruthless in that. And her nickname Black Widow came because she mostly had her ex-husbands killed and executed whenever anything came up. And, some of them were business partners. And as soon as they parted ways and they were sort of not seeing eye to eye, she killed them or had them killed, which is, a great way to run business, maybe not a great way to run a family.
I have to say, the first time that I watched the trailer for Griselda, I was like, are they trying to girl boss the drug trade? Is that what I'm watching at the moment? Was that your reaction to when you first saw the trailer?
I mean, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of like, we've seen all the boys and now women get a chance. But, this is not a story that's being made up. This was sort of like, as you said, it's sort of true-ish. Yeah. So the way that Netflix is doing it. And, in Colombia, they've already done various novellas on her. She's been in a lot of series. Like this is a figure that is a lot more known in Colombia that I think that most of the Netflix subscribers or even American or Canadian audiences. So it does feel a little bit like girl boss Gaslight and then sort of
I actually want to come back to that, but first let's talk about the fact that this fits well within the Narcos universe and the Narcos series. It's made by the same people who put out the Narcos series, which is also on Netflix. You're not a fan of the Narcos genre. What's going on with that, Manuel?
I mean, I keep needing to say that it's like a kind of a personal thing.
Okay.
Like I'm a little bit allergic to it. And I think part of it is that I grew up in a time when this kind of violence and the drug war and the drug trade was so pervasive. It was so part of my childhood of like feeling somewhat unsafe. I mean, I lived a rather privileged life when I was in Colombia and Bogota. That's where I grew up. But, my aunt got, Pablo Escobar's mother lived across the street and that building got bombed. And sort of we knew people who suffered from violence. Like it was sort of, sometimes it feels a little too close to home, especially when it's packaged in this kind of like thrilling, really fun criminal series.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me also like the narco and this kind of criminal anti-hero, which is all over, peak TV, is sort of the limit case of what a craven capitalist world can create, which is like, we're individuals and I'm going to only care about myself and my family. And I don't care what I need to do and who I need to stumble over. And that to me is sort of on a personal level, like always just makes me very allergic to being able to sort of then just go along for the ride with these stories, even when they're well made, even when they're greatly produced, even when they're like beautifully performed as they are here.
I mean, I was going to say, I appreciate your principled opposition to the genre, but then we got to talk about the fact that you didn't mind this one. What do you think sets this one apart?
I mean, I think, it's like a little bit of the girl boss thing at all, because I do think the way the show really textures how Griselda in this depiction, and especially when she's portrayed by Sofia Vergara, uses her femininity to get in and out of spaces, and how she's constantly needing to negotiate. Or are they underestimating me because I'm a woman? Can I get away with something because I'm a woman? What spaces can I go in and out of? And at what time I'm a grizzled mama bear, and at others I'm this like wily sort of woman who can seduce her way through something. And I think we saw a little bit of that clip when she's like that you played that she's menacing. She's menacing. But of course it's Sofia Vergara, so there's always this enthralling and this alluring, and sort of you can see. So that to me seemed something different that we haven't seen in the genre so far.
Sofia Vergara's talked about how she wanted this character to be a little like Tony Soprano. Like she wants people, like people hate a lot of bad guys in shows. They don't hate Tony Soprano. They actually kind of feel bad for him, even though he's very explicitly the bad guy. Does she deliver the same kind of performance here, do you think?
Oh, I think so. And I think, it surprised me. And I've known and I've followed her work. I was trying to I don't do the math, but like she did her first commercial in 1989. So I was already, but by the time I was alive, she was already 35. Do the math. But,
okay.
But so she's been famous basically my entire life. And I for the longest time, that initial commercial was a Pepsi commercial where she was on a beach and like slowly getting naked, and it was very sexy. So she has always been this sort of like sexy bombshell my entire life. So I was even surprised that she was able to pull this off. And, she's talked about how she, hired an acting coach, and she really was trying to do the work. Because for her, it's always been instinctual. And for her, it's always been, Modern Family, I think, came really easily to her. So I loved seeing that she was texturing this performance, and she was being very nuanced, and that she can do the menacing. And it doesn't feel like a put on act, and it doesn't feel like a vanity project. It feels like, oh, hopefully this is the thing that then kickstarts and opens doors for her to do so much more interesting work ahead.
We should say the third episode actually opens with this. I mean, Manuel, they're not trying to be subtle here. This is an obvious nod to Gloria, the character that Sofia Vergara plays in Modern Family. I'm curious, when you're watching this, do you ever for a moment go, I'm no longer watching Gloria, I'm actually watching someone play Griselda? Like, does Gloria ever leave your mind watching the show?
Well, I mean, I laughed out loud when this came on, like, and it is the third episode, and you're just like, oh my God, they actually did it. But I think it's actually quite smart, rather than run away from it and rather than pretend like Gloria didn't happen, which I think, as you point out, like Vergara really can't do. Like Modern Family was so huge, she was Emmy nominated, like the show has such a cultural footprint. But I think one of the things to understand is that I think there's a way of seeing Gloria and Griselda at this sort of like two sides of the same coin. Like, whereas Gloria, I mean, they're both mothers who came to the US, who, I mean, obviously there's a different tenor and a sensibility.
I would say so, yes.
And a kind of genre, right? Like, but in the one hand, you're getting this like Colombian mother who would do anything for her kid in this sort of like sunny sitcom on ABC. And on the other, she's in this like dark, grizzled thriller that's for a Netflix Narcos audience. But there is that sense of that charm that really she exudes, and it is a very much a Colombian trope. And, you know, this like really sexy, outgoing woman who will do sort of anything that is very familiar to me, that is very familiar to so I love thinking of them as sort of this like light and dark. So it made sense for me that they wouldn't run away from it, but they would want to keep Gloria a little bit in the back of your mind, just to understand why Griselda was maybe as charming and cunning and alluring as she ends up being throughout the show.
There's I mean, the face is strikingly different because like she's using prosthetics here. The fake teeth are quite distracting, honestly. Because I'm like, I know what this person looks like. I've seen a lot of Modern Family. But the thing that like I was thinking most struck by in her performance is the physicality. Like you actually see Sofia Vergara try to walk in a different way than Gloria does, and you go like, I'm almost convinced that you're a different person than the person that I've known so well for so long in that show. I have to say, when Sofia Vergara played Gloria in Modern Family, some people didn't like the way that she leaned into stereotypes about Colombian women, which can, of course, be really harmful. How do you square that with what she's doing now, playing this Colombian cartel girl boss?
Yeah, I mean, when Modern Family came out, I had a very vexed sort of relationship to it, and mostly because you were pointing out, right, that there was all these stereotypes that were sort of really leaning into. And I think one of the things that I have come to sort of the way that I think about it now is that it's very hard to place the burden of representation of Colombian women on the shoulders of Gloria, or on the shoulders of Sofia Vergara, or now on the shoulders of Griselda Blanco. I think it just happens to be that because she's the one, she now has to like stand in. And I think that was hard to do it all. And I think that's hard to ask of a character in a sitcom when all of these various different characters were also leaning into stereotypes. Really, Claire Dunphy was like leaning into this like white woman, sort of girl boss in a way, and like the mom sitcom. And you know, we had Cam leaning into all these like gay, effeminate stereotypes. And so if she had been in a show where she was the only one doing that caricature and sort of leaning into it and really playing around with it, I think I would have been more. I ended up being a little bit more lenient, understanding that sort of within the Modern Family, like she was just another trope. She just happened to be a Colombian one. Yeah. I think what she's doing here, you know, it is again a little problematic, but mostly because I just always wish there were more stories to tell about Colombia than the narco story, than the drug trade story, than the guerrilla story, than the war-torn story. And in a way, I will say Netflix does produce a lot of that content. It just ends up being buried. It's just not usually marketed to the North American market. Like they have a production company in Bogota, and they're doing a lot of shows that are in Spanish, and so I understand that this one is crossing over, and this one is sort of part of the conversation because you have Vergara behind it. So I wish she had gone for like a much sunnier,
a different kind of portrayal,
kind of portrayal, maybe, and maybe that's what she'll do next.
I hope that is what she does next. I got to leave it there, Manuel. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here. I have to go and finish the rest of the show, but thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Emmanuel Betancourt is a writer based in LA. You can stream Griselda right now on Netflix. And that is it for the podcast today. Remember, you can listen to any episode anytime you like, wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I'll see you tomorrow.